So I start with Matthew Rauser. He's from Malmö, as I said before. He's an urbanist. He's working on a very interesting project. It's called City API. Maybe you can talk later about it a little bit. We have Maxim Nurudi, is it right? Yeah, from Waymate. Waymate started with, let's say, revolutionary e-bike things, and now is into developing something like an integrated service app for mobility that everybody who wants to go from A to B can check, and it's no matter what transport mean, they will give the answer. Maybe you can talk also later about this. We have Andreas Leo. He's the speaker from Car2Go. You all may know from Hamburg. If you're from Hamburg, you all know the blue-white cars, and he's the guy behind it somehow. And then we have Michael Heuer. He's here from the city government, and he is in the how do you say? He's in the administration of transport and economy and industry innovation.
Ministry of Economics, Transport, and Innovation.
Great. And he is in charge of the infrastructure planning in this city. So, how do you say, it's the administration of transport and economy and industry innovation. Okay. Yeah, we have. Great. And he is in charge of the infrastructure planning in this city. So, how do you say, it's the administration of transport and economy. So we have Espen Danielsen. He is one of the founders and the drivers behind the Roskilde Festival. The Roskilde Festival, what's to do with mobility? Okay, mobility. He's like a future inventorist guy. He runs a thing. I have to look. It's called Roskilde Festival Orange Innovation, and he's like introducing new products and services, especially with the question on how we can introduce innovation with volunteer forces and volunteer people. So, Espen, do you hear me? No, he doesn't hear me. Great. Maybe this was his answer. I think we will keep him in line and we check out if it works later. And we go ahead and, okay. So I hope all your microphones work well. We didn't check it, but if not, I'm gonna handle it over to you. We had in this, I laid out some, let's say, some visionary things, and I said this is what people with us discussed last weekend. So we discussed about inner city traffic, we discussed about the commuter thing, and we discussed about goods transport. So, and I want to start now with you discussing about the inner city traffic, because you are all somehow expert on this topic. And first question I want to start with, will we, in the city centers, will we be more mobile in 2050 than we are today, or will we be less mobile? What do you suppose? Maybe Matthew, you can start.
For me, mobility is such a broad concept, and I think it kind of goes into the I think, therefore I am. If I can, then I do with mobility. So when we think about mobility, it's not just the actual act of getting from A to B with a person or a good, but all of the data and the information that's necessary to make the decision and to have the options and things. So I think depending on what perspective you put it into, I think we will have, as technology continues to permeate, as we get data more and more open in our lives, I think that, yeah, we will be more mobile in a certain sense.
I think for Andreas Leo, this must sound good because he is in a way selling mobility. Do you think also we will be more mobile, or will it decrease the amount of mobility we will have in our cities?
No, I agree with him. I'm thinking also we will be more mobile in the future, and I think mobility will be more connected. So we will have more multimodal mobility in the cities. So we will be more switching like today between different types of transportation.
Mm. You both, Maxime and you work on connecting mobility modes, I would say. How does Car2Go go ahead with that?
Yeah, of course, we're seeing Car2Go as some kind of piece of a puzzle, and the puzzle is called urban mobility. And of course, there are other means of transportation. First of all, the public transport, buses and trains, and but also bike sharing concepts and classical car sharing concepts, car rental concepts. And we are trying to cooperate with many of them and bringing them all together with our Movil concept, which is a new mobility platform where you can choose the best way to get from A to B.
So Waymate, I learned, is doing almost the same thing, or isn't it? Tell us a bit about Waymate.
Well, when we started 3 years ago, the vision was to offer a door-to-door platform. And if we had known how difficult it was, we might have started selling shoes in Portugal or something like that. So, but we had a little hybris at that time, and we thought, okay, let's take a look at that. But the good outcome of it was that we today very good understand how long distance traveling works, and on the contrast, how our short distance traveling works, so urban traveling. And our approach today is basically to say, let's connect these two things, because people that travel on an urban matter also need to travel on long distance, and other way around, people traveling on long distance, arriving here in Hamburg, coming from Malmö, would like to know how to move within the city and see what other options they have. So that's the approach that we have to connect both long distance and short distance traveling.
Okay, and so am I right if I say they do some of your job when they try to connect all those mobility means, or is this something you are lucky that they are doing it?
No.
What's your position to it? Is it realistic to go this way?
I think we will have no increase in mobility.
We will not have an increase. Okay.
Because we will have other modes and little change perhaps in time, but basic structure, our urban system will be the same. Our infrastructure will be the same, or nearly the same. We will have some line attention. We'll still have a system, which is now nearly 1,000. And looking back 30 years, when I started my engineering career, I could look forward. It's nearly 30 years too. So there will be no fundamental change, and the citizens will live in this urban structure. They will work in this urban structure, and they won't be able to go 3 times to work every day. So I think they will go less times to work, but for the other purpose, for vacancy or something else, and they will take another mode, but or different modes. But we will still have car mobility or car traffic, it's not mobility. And we will have great problems in public transport due to the limited budget, public budget. We will have capacity problems. We will have demography problems within the social system. The pension funds will be problematic to finance mobility for all the people. And so the public budget, limited public budget, has to be spent to guarantee the basic mobility.
But I learned already 2 days ago, I learned from guys from Copenhagen that in Copenhagen we have something like a service for elderly people that you bring up and they pick you up and it's free. Is that true?
I don't know. I don't have any elderly friends in Copenhagen. I'm sorry. It sounds like
I can comment if you can hear me, Hamburg.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but
Can you hear me from Denmark?
And you are kind of preparing for a new, I say, wave of mobility, which is more complex, more fragmented. This idea of that mobility also will organize in a more, let's say, informal way, which was obviously one outcome of our little workshop group. Is this a realistic one? I don't know if anybody is familiar with the concept of shared space. That means we don't have any traffic signs anymore. We have like agreement traffic thing, where you go inside and you have to be careful about, the car has to be careful about the pedestrian and the other way around. It's a model coming from Holland, being introduced here in Germany into a small town. Hamburg didn't go that way, but people, when we talk to them, every time they say, okay, shared space should be something we go ahead with, we should introduce. Does Copenhagen have some experience with that model?
With shared space? Very little.
Okay.
Things tend to be very divided, bikeways and pedestrian ways, and of course, public spaces, city squares and things like that. But in general, there's a place for this and there's a place for that. But there is still a sort of code esprit that people abide by, and there's such a high percentage of people commuting bicycle that it's really a part of the culture. So it's more than tolerated. It's actually a part of things and looked at as an equal part of the solution. So you could say it's shared in that sense, but not yeah.
I'd like to reply on what you said, because looking at the future from our current perspective, he's very right, because you mentioned the budget issue and the allocation of resources, and this heavily impacts our decision-making process. I was very happy that we were allowed to give you some of our ideas for your website, and one of my main issues was, that's a little excursion, when we're talking about better mobility in 2050, we also have to understand how we can improve our decision-making processes. Yeah. Because at the moment, how decision-making processes are working and how you allocate resources on a municipal level, we will have, if you have the current status quo, your reality that you described is very probable to be the one reality. So if we want a different reality in 2050, we have to carefully take into consideration how we change our decision-making processes in the next years. Because today we work on a constitution that's basically 100 years old, in the thought at least, and the people who made it were like born in the late 19th century. So it's not adapted towards what has been going on the last 50, 60 years. So making mobility more functional towards that has also to do with how we in a community live together, how we decide, how we allocate our money. And if we want to improve public transit, of course, much more resources have to be invested in that.
Yes, I would agree. But as far as a politician is afraid of every pothole in the city, we will have no change.
What that mean? I read out that it could be something like the Chinese way or the Swiss way. So the changing of decision making could mean more authoritarian way or more participatory way. What is your way?
I would say it's very natural. I think for us German it's not natural, but the French, I don't know how many constitutional changes they've had, like the First Republic, Second Republic, Third Republic, and we're still working on a constitution from 1949. Yeah. So I think that kind of thought chain that's behind our constitution has to be revisited. Is it really smart to organize us in the way how we do it today? I think it's a very political question, it's a very democratic question, and it has a lot to do with how we want to live in urban areas. And it's connected in a sense. So the outcome, I mean, of course, nobody knows here on that place, but I think starting a discussion in this country is the basis of how we organize ourselves still like applicable in the 21st century is something I would highly appreciate to have that. I would be curious which party would take that on. Maybe there's none of the parties that do that, and it would be a completely new movement. Maybe it's the younger generation that says how we organize ourselves today is just not applicable for us anymore.
I have to add something. Yes, you are talking about the political decision-making process. At the end of the 70s and the beginning 80s, it is discussed very intensively the reasons for trip generation and its behavior of the citizens. And every change in the transportation conditions of a city, not in the mobility, but in the transportation conditions, will start with the change in the behavior of the individuals beginning, where do I take my living area? We got the wandering to the neighborhoods outside. Now we've got a different development, and so this will change the transportation situation within our city firstly, and then we will have hopefully
So change of behavior and not of constitution. So
yes.
2 poles.
This will be the first.
It seems like Espen's joining us. Espen, can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Wow, excellent.
Very good.
You know, I always, it seems for me like you are on the ISS space station somewhere. We always say do a turn and lift your whiskey or something. So great that you're joining us. Hope things work out fine. I want to introduce you to the old people you maybe have read before who they are, because if not, I'm repeating everything. So we are right into the discussion now of, let's say, near-field mobility, like the mobility in the neighborhood and how that might change. And we were talking about what things behind mobility have to change. Maybe we have to think about change of decision-making because we are not going ahead with innovative solutions, or we have to address at least more the change of behavior. So people really have to behave in another way that mobility has to change. One question I want to add to that is the question about what has been rising in our workshop groups, the idea of experimental zones. We read sometimes about cities that try out and block for 1 month, one street to see what happens. These are like experimental approaches to see if behavior can be changed, to see what effects turn out of this. Is this a way also you in the governmental institutions think?
We did it in the 70s already.
So why don't we do this now? Didn't it work out? Didn't it work out?
No. For instance, if you know a little bit the Hamburg, if you know the Phoenixville in Hamburg.
Yeah.
It's a museum for traffic reducement.
Yeah.
Because in the 70s we started with traffic calming ideas with color on the pavement, and we got all elements you could imagine for traffic calming within this residential area, and we learned quite a lot by these experiments. For instance, the barriers, the diagonal barriers are not comfortable for, and so for the bike, for the cyclists and so. And we did it already. And for instance, Hamburg got the tempo 30 speed limit within the residential areas. The idea was born in Hamburg, and it was an experiment in the early 80s, and since 1983 we got this very successful situation, and so there is space for experiments, but you cannot do a laboratory within the whole entire city.
So then we should maybe catch up to this tradition here. Espen, you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, thank you. I now want to turn a bit to the topic of car freeness. You didn't hear before because we introduced some, let's say, visions which we produced together with some citizens here in Hamburg. And
I have heard it all.
Excellent. One vision was that there should be a car-free inner city. So in Copenhagen, you have almost a car-free inner city, as I learned. What is your experience with that? You're living in Denmark. Is this a horrible mess, or is this a good thing to have a car-free city?
It's depending on the public transport system. If there's good bus connections, good taxi connections, good walkways, it's not a problem having a car-free inner city. But if the bus connections is always also going around the inner city, it's a very shitty thing. And that's not soluted. There's no final solution in Copenhagen. We have several streets with a temporary thing where it's only for a while trying stuff, like I heard you have done in the 70s in Hamburg. We are doing right now in Copenhagen.
Yeah, we are a very old city. Okay, thanks. But Andreas Leo, if you hear about car-free cities, now your business model is based on sharing cars. Is it a horrible vision for you, or do you say, okay, this could something we could handle also?
Yeah, to speak quite frankly, so I really don't believe in completely car-free cities because
let's say inner cities.
Yeah, in inner cities. Our experience is that even if more and more people inside city areas don't want to own a car, there are some reasons or many reasons they still want to use a car sometimes. For different use cases. So if there is something to transport, or if public transport is not very convenient, or whatever. And so I think it's not the question to have one or the other thing, but to have both of them or all of them, and to bring them in some kind of ecosystem that will be easy and convenient for everyone, and yeah, don't bring many problems with it.
Yeah, Maxime, what do you think about car freeness?
What's wrong?
He's doing some jokes, maybe, huh? Espen? You know the thing here, face now. Maxime, you started, as I read, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, with the e-bike thing as a service expert for e-bikes.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to go even way back.
Okay.
Further. In 2004, I worked for Royal Dutch Shell in London, and they have this very famous scenarios department, and we were working on climate change scenarios at that time. And it was very interesting what we worked on, because we had scenarios for inner cities that were really horrible, and I think we also should take into consideration it could be this very shiny, nice future, but it could be very, very dramatic also.
Tell us something. What could happen?
Well, I mean, if you look at the shortage of oil that we have, we don't have any other solution on combustion engines right now that reduce CO2 emissions. So, I mean, we're betting a lot towards the outcome of research in the future. But as of right now, and the results that how our industrialized countries, and even like China, India, how much CO2 they produce, we will have climate scenarios that affect our cities that would really make living horrible. And this may be a factor we shouldn't discuss today, because it would be a horrible kind of outcome. We go home like, oh my God, I don't want to live that way. But personally, I always want to come back to that factor that if we want to bring different modes of transportation into cities, if we want to change habits in cities, you can't do this top down, like directively, say, morale has to change. You have to offer something that's great. And how can we offer something that's great in public transit? Like right now, we can't, because our resources are limited. And if you continue to think that way, why are resources limited? Well, because how money is allocated today and how the political process works, we won't have any gain in that game at the moment. So again, I'm sorry I have to come back to this constitution issue. We really have to discuss how we decide within our society, and I think we have to decide much more locally. Like, I mean, let's take a look at things like e-government, more direct input of local communities into what's going on here. And let the local community allocate its own resources. Let's decide ourselves here in St. Pauli how we want to allocate the money that we have, at least to a certain degree. I know this might sound visionary. I know some people might say this might be very idealistic. Yes, but we have to start talking about how to move forward, because the way how we do it right now is like the Stuttgart 21 style, the Berlin airport style, and the Hamburg opera style. And these are just the big projects. And if you look at the small project, it's the same.
So
could I comment?
Yeah.
I quite agree that you have to take the things from bottom up, But I think it's quite important not to wait on the constitutionary system. The citizens can act right now if they want. We have a lot of projects where the citizens just do, and car sharing is a quite good example. We have many citizens in Copenhagen and cities around doing their own car sharing stuff, and when that is growing, you have solutions. You don't have to wait on the politicians, because the normal government system normally decides on the reality 10 years ago. That's how the system works, but the citizen can act on the system today. So I think a quite important thing is to start projects from bottom up on the level of the citizen and have them to act. We, for example, use Roskilde Festival, which is the 4th biggest city in Denmark, for 10 days, to create experiments, and people take the experiments with them home and do it where they come from. Not waiting on a long debate, but just start car sharing, start sharing of housing, start sharing of bikes, start sharing of machines for fixing snow and ice, and you can continue that way.
So also Matthew's working quite a lot on the model of that people act from bottom up. Tell us a bit about your project first, City RP, which is exactly going in this direction.
Yeah, I actually had a chance to talk to Espen yesterday at his presentation at Copenhagen Social Media Week. And there's a lot of overlap between our visions. And I agree that it's extremely important to just get out there and do it. We had another great reminder most recently with the Arab Spring about how it's always good to put more power in the hands of the people and get them active and engaged and using new forms of technology. But what my project does is it's called City API, and it looks at the city space itself as a sort of web platform or a social network, and it aims to give you access to the code that will help you to build and change the space in the way that you see fit. So, in simpler terms, it's looking at empty spaces within your neighborhood and letting you have the tools and empowering you to actually make something happen there. Not looking at long-term kind of planning projects, but small things that you can do right now and get your neighbors involved with you to help build and change this for the better, and take those small steps, which will eventually add up to the big steps. I just wanted to also follow up on some of the things Ben said earlier in terms of thinking of mobility as the ability to make the right choices. And I think that ties in really well. Being more empowered to understand your own space and to work with your space gives you more perspective and allows you to make the right kinds of choices when it comes to your own personal transit and mobility. And I think it's going to become more and more important that we have the right kind of access to data and those sort of things so that we can make more and more of those positive choices. So.
Is this maybe the first step of this change of behavior you mentioned before, the activist and crowdsourcing scene, I would say, or is it something different?
I think our urban system is so complex, and all the transportation problems we got, it's a vision. I think you cannot avoid to deal with big investment solving problems. You have to provide mass transport systems within a city, and you won't get them by local activities or by local funding. And of course, there must be a discussion on how to spend the budget or how to use the money. But I'm in the beginning of the 60s, and so I'm back to the 70s now. If you remember the political discussions of the 70s, there was created the way of the two ways. You have to work within the system, and you have to work in local organizations or in local political engagement.
What if the system is messed up?
So I think we need the big projects and the local activities too.
So
there's a big difference today that the local activists have social media. In the 70s, you could organize more locally. Today, you can organize much more rapidly. In the city where I live, outside Copenhagen, called Roskilde, there's an area where there are 10 times as many car-sharing cars that can transport people than the bus system. And that this is created from bottom up. So here you have public transportation system which is much bigger than the normal bus system. And that's because they can quite quickly scale up, because they can communicate much easier from one activist community to another. And you couldn't do that in the 70s.
But talking about sharing, I always doubt a little bit if there isn't maybe a limit of sharing. How deep can sharing go? Isn't there something like the need to possess or to own something which is mine, my car, my little home on wheels, something like this? What do you think, Andreas Leo? Is this an issue for you? Do you see any limits? Because when I listen to Espen, I think everybody can share everything. So we will go into a sharing society and everything will be fine.
Yeah, so I'm sure there will be still some goods you don't want to share. So sometimes even when bad weather conditions are, sometimes I want to share my dog. but of course I'm happy to own it and to have it for myself. But I think sharing of goods is increasing. You mentioned sharing of tools, or sharing of cars, sharing of bikes, but I think no one here in the room would like to share the smartphone or whatever.
I know many people who, when I introduced to them the idea of sharing their own car, like peer-to-peer sharing, like you said, Espen, they say, "Oh no, I would never share my car with another one. I get it back messy, and they will smoke inside and do some bad things inside." Yeah. So, is it maybe a German problem we are facing, or?
I think it's a generation problem.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, okay. We have those studies saying the younger generations don't own their cars anymore. So this is maybe a big issue for car companies. The reason why Daimler maybe made car sharing.
Yeah. One of the reasons, but there's still. So we have to point out that even if the more and more younger people don't want to own their car, there are still lots of young people who still want to own a car, and even if the number of people who refuse to see a car as a status symbol is increasing, there are lots of them who still are interested in cars, of course, worldwide or globally spoken. But we have more and more people, maybe in large cities, who don't want to own a car for different reasons. One reason is you have increasing costs, especially parking costs are increased very much in the past years, and this will go on and on. And
the way I like to sum it up is I love driving. I'm from Detroit. I'm from the Motor City. My grandfather worked for Ford for 50 years. I love driving, but I hate having to drive. And that's what I go back one more time to having the options, having the choices, and being able to say, I'm taking this way of this mode of transportation because it's more efficient, it's cost better, and it's better for the environment. And don't play down that aspect too, because people in my generation increasingly think about that, about the environmental impact of their choice, not just the time and the money, but also what their carbon footprint is doing. So
you said you hate if you must drive somewhere. Many people must drive. We have 1/2 of the people in the Hamburg closer suburban area that have to commute to the city. You talked about bad scenarios you figured out in your early professional life. Were there any scenarios saying we will see an end of commuting and a decrease and decline of suburbia as a life model because it's based on the commuting thing?
Well, actually, I didn't want to bring that topic up because the probability of shell scenarios were not too enthusiastic. Let's put it this way. Because there's still a high risk that we don't find technologies that reduce CO2 emissions, and so we have to find other ways to cope with that. But I would like to agree what you said about the diversity and the different colors of options that one would like to have, especially in urban areas. So that's why that's actually why we wanted to connect all modes of transportation that you have within the city and give you all the options that are available. So if you're either in Hamburg, Berlin, Stuttgart, Munich, you just take a look at your app. So and people have different preferences. For somebody, it's very important to get very quickly from A to B, and he has a big budget, so he doesn't care. So, all right, how much would taxi cost? Others would say, well, PT, so public transit is my way to go. And to be able to compare these different modes of transportation and to quickly decide on my own preferences is something that I find very beneficial in 21st century. So that's what we work on to give that option to consumers.
So yeah, I agree with that. So mobility behavior is just changing and changing right now. So we are all moving in a completely different way through all cities compared with 10 years ago or 5 years ago. We all have, or most of us have smartphones, and you're just checking is a train just in time, or is there a delay of 5 or 10 minutes? Where's the next stop of public transport? Where's the next free car to go? Where's the next bike sharing station? And so on and so on.
I would agree for that, looking at the inner cities, but when I look at the outskirts, I have in mind what Espen said about Roskilde, that there is like peer-to-peer car sharing, a lot of peer-to-peer car sharing. We don't have that in Germany so much, and Car2Go is ending somewhere in the city core due to technical and organizational problems. Is there a model for introducing car sharing into the suburban areas? Is this useful even?
Yeah, of course, car sharing is also good for suburban areas, but you have to look which kind of car sharing. So a free-floating car sharing, on-demand car sharing like Car2Go needs to have lots of customers nearby, and the cars must rent it several times a day to be a profitable business model. And I think in suburban areas or rural areas, you will have more the traditional station-based car sharing with fixed rental stations where people can go and rent a car and bring it back.
I agree. Okay, but when we look the other side of the medal, it's maybe doing something with the suburban spaces. So do we have to change suburbia instead of always introducing new modes of transport and thinking about to organize transport in a new way? Do we have to change suburbia? Do we have to urbanize suburbia to?
No. But,
okay, that's fine.
But we got a problem, basic problem, the problem of speed. The travel time, average travel time is nearly constant over the years, but the distances and the speed increased, and so we got the settlements far away from the city centers, and so we have an increase in transport.
So that means we still travel 45 minutes a day, but we do like 30 kilometers instead of 10.
Yes, and I think this is a problem. Okay. And the idea of Schumacher, I don't know whether you know Schumacher, the old city architect in the 20s. The idea of a very strong line system with public transport means and settlements around these public transport services. This will be more convenient than a urbanization of the outskirts or something else. Mm. You cannot avoid that the people. There might be just other ideas which can happen. Imagine the social problems will increase in Southern Europe. We will have commuting flights, perhaps from Spain or from Kiev to Hamburg every weekend. Every Friday there will be 5 flights to Kiev. So with people who migrated from there to Hamburg for work, for labor, for employment, and but they came from these areas in Europe, which. So this is just another
commuting may shift on a totally other scale.
Yes.
When we compare Hamburg and Copenhagen from city figure, we have both the same structure. We have in Copenhagen it's the fingers going outside in the landscape. Roskilde is like the I think it's the ring finger or something, right? And then we have in Hamburg, we have the feeder plan, the same idea of having strong transport lines, bringing people out and back to the city. Is that working in Copenhagen? I heard something about like a commuter war, I would say, that the city of Copenhagen would like to have more cars outside of the city, would push the cars outside of the city. They want to introduce big car hubs where you can change to the public transport outside Copenhagen, but some counties in Copenhagen don't agree with that and say, okay, you can place your car hubs anywhere, but not in our place. So how do the Copenhagens go ahead with this topic of commuting?
I'll wait for Absinthe for the political side of it, but I know that from the planning perspective, they've done a lot of really aggressive things in order to push the cars out, like reducing the amount of parking available in the city 1% every year for 20 years. So that's 20% of the parking just gone. And that puts a lot of pressure on people who want to have cars in the city, and it makes you really evaluate your decisions. But maybe Absinthe can say.
Well, Roskilde, is it like a self-containing city, or do people always commute with their shared cars to Copenhagen? How's it working?
Ask again. I'm not sure your question.
We're talking about commuter problem, traffic problems, and how is it in your area? Is it well organized, or is the commuter amount decreasing, fading away because of traffic issues and people reorganizing their lives, moving towards the city of the centers? How is it?
Because of the pricing of housing, we have a change in behavior concerning Copenhagen and the suburbs. 5 years ago, people was moving out of Copenhagen and living more and more in the suburbs. Now it's the other way around. More and more people staying in the city center of Copenhagen, and you have less new families in the suburbs. The traffical situation is quite well functioning on public transport, especially trains in Denmark.
Mm-hmm. So this is also a question of offering a good alternative, as we said before. Last topic I want to go into is the goods transport. As I learned in some workshop from the city government, the transport traffic is maybe the heaviest problem of our cities. Is that true?
No, it's a problem with a link to the hinterland, to the southern European countries. This is a problem, the main problem. I don't think it's a problem within Altona or something in these urban areas. It's a problem of transport goods on railway, and the capacity of the railway, of the national railway, to the other countries in Austria and Czech Republic and so. And there must be an improvement. And I think we cannot avoid this transport. It is necessary for Hamburg, and we have to deal with it so that the urban functions and the living conditions in the residential areas, that there will be no impact. We got another problem by the goods transport, and this is a consequence of the modern communication by internet, for instance. The delivery, the city logistics. Everybody is able with the app to get his pizza and to get his new notebook, and to all these things are delivered by cars within our residential areas. And this is transport, this is traffic, and this
again, behavior.
This is in the urban living atmosphere.
When I looked at our workshop, people all agreed that we have to change the way we consume things. They also talked about the internet things, and we talked about silly things like introducing an internet fee, which will, in a way, punish you if you order something which you could have directly in front of your door for a long distance, or things like this. the question for me is, do we have to reorganize the way we produce our goods, and do we have to reorganize the way we consuming things? Will this come as a, let's say, restriction towards us, or can we go ahead like this, buying things that are produced somewhere else in the world, buying lots of stuff only to watch to it and send it back to Amazon, then we don't like it, and producing heavy traffics out this way? Maybe
Could I start?
Yeah, you can start, of course.
In Denmark, in especially Copenhagen, for example, we have a growing thing of people-run, voluntarily run supermarket, where you only sell local produced goods. So it's the local people voluntarily working at the supermarket. Once in a week, you get delivered your goods. So instead of going by car to the supermarket every day, bringing stuff from all over the world, you're focusing what you want to buy, which is locally produced, and you only get it once a week. In this matter, and this is growing very quickly, the model is coming from New York City, where it's quite big. You have very less transportation, and you have a growing thing of local produced goods. It's a good example of how the people themselves try to find solutions, which is the total opposite of this having your pizza brought by car every day. And by Amazon. You have also the opposite model, which decreased traffic, decreased long time producing, and so on. And this is not just a minor thing in Copenhagen. This is growing very quickly for the last 2 years.
And will we see also like things that are attaching to the sharing model, like I share my car with your goods? Is this a scenario which could be realistic, Mr. Leo?
Yeah, we are just working on that. For example, we have a partnership, a strategic partnership with a startup company called Tiramisu, which organized or created a platform, internet platform for sharing transportation for goods. And so the idea behind that is to integrate this and maybe combine that with Car2Go or with other means of transportation. So you can say, okay, I'm going from A to B, and is there opportunity that I can transport something for someone between A to B? And so you can combine those different means of transportation or different goods, persons, and
so we will really maybe see, like the guy I showed in the picture before, some heavy packed cars. Maybe this is not the picture we like to see. I go into the last round now, because I think you, Andreas Leo, you have to leave pretty soon.
For a long time, for long distance commuting. Yes.
For long distance commuting to Berlin, which takes not so much time like to go to Bergedorf here. One last question. Imagine you were on the street, you had to go to your home place, and you are in your car alone, and you see those other guys standing on the street. Which guy would you take for a hitchhike? We start with Matthew, and tell me why.
Any of us?
Yeah. Not me.
No, okay. Well, you did buy me coffee earlier, so I would return the favor. Well, I've talked to Max the most so far, and it's been just scratched the surface. So I'd actually really like to continue that conversation. So.
Okay, yeah. Max, go ahead, please.
Sorry, but I take Andreas because I find very interesting what Daimler's doing, and I highly appreciate the bravery actually that they came up with Car2Go and all these investments into My Taxi and so on. So I find that very interesting, the path that Daimler's going. I'd like to talk to him about that.
Okay, business to go, like. Andreas, you have to take my talk, not you. I'm gonna take you.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would like to take you all, but unfortunately, a Car2Go is only a two-seater, and so, so I have to decide to someone. So maybe I take Matthew, because we found out that we are both urban planners, and so maybe I'm still interested in those API thing you told me about that.
So, like, who do you want to chat to in your car?
I offer a link to the central station. My car is outside.
Oh, okay,
Very good.
I see. Okay, so thank you all for joining here and for coming to Hamburg for this even very short discussion. I thank you also for listening and for being here. I hope you got some inspiration, and maybe we'll see in 1 year and see if you change some of your transportation behavior. Okay, so thanks and keep moving. Goodbye.
I'm not offended.
What is it?
I'm not offended. It's okay.
Ich hatte gar keine Uhr. Das ist gar nicht. Ah.